Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone. Let me see if I can pull this in. Yeah, welcome to IRC. As people are trickling in, I'm really grateful to see lots of familiar faces. And we do have a really packed schedule today, so we'll get started. But before we do, there are a few newcomers here. If you don't mind introducing yourself, you state your name and where you're from, and share a little bit about your interests and perhaps how did you come about and stumble to this group? Oops, that's not it right there. Anne, do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Hi. Thank you for the invitation to join you all. My name is Anne Williamson. I'm the director of clinical education at a small independent university in Pittsburgh, Chatham University. So I'm an associate professor and manage all of our clin ed program. And in doing so, over the past few years, I've realized the necessary pieces to data management amongst all the other things we do. So over the past few years, I slowly just really tried to train myself in more data management. What ended up happening is I'm in class 7 of 10 wrapping up a master's degree in health informatics. So I've sort of fallen in love with data management. Currently, I'm trying to teach myself how to build some dashboards that I'm going to put on a website I've built for my consortium that helps our clinical partners go to one place to have question and answers of, okay, I agree to take a student. What's the evaluation tool they use? What's their setting and preparation based on the program they're coming from? So I have all this raw data collected, and I'm currently teaching myself pivot tables to build a dashboard to post on the website that I built. So that's my current project. But I'm working on the masters, and I was at ELC and just ended up getting to hear Stephen and Sam in a couple different talks and introduce myself. So that's how I ended up here.
Welcome. It's fantastic that you're getting through this. There's a whole world of pivot tables once you hit Tableau. So it's exciting to hear what you're doing in your institution. Anyone else? Anyone new? And would you like to introduce yourself here? Okay. Well, a few announcements. I just got an email, and I know there's been some discussions about in APTA from Academy of Leadership Innovation. There's new learning management systems. So if you have not gotten any emails and you're a member of APTA, I'm happy to forward it to you, or you can Google search it and you should see. And I just want to share a couple more things. There's a Learn Network. If you have not heard of this, a collaborative, it's a lot of it is a research topic, but they really discuss the learning health system and data. And I think they're going to be talking about some informatics work next. I might be wrong, but I think they're going to explore that next year or so. But I put a link. Oh, you know what? I'm so sorry. I'm not moving my screen. Let me move my screen. If I can get to my screen. Here you go. There you go. Okay. So I'll put this up after our call, but check them out. There is one other group, Promise Collaborative Group. So Promise is a patient-reported outcome measurement information systems. It's a quality of life measure that covers a lot of different domains. I've been part of this member for about 2.5, 3 years or so, and they have a collaborative group, and you don't need to pay anything to join. They do talk about outcomes. Recently, we're talking about dashboards. A lot of the discussion is around Epic and Tableau and integration and so forth. But if anyone is interested, let me know. I could get you connected to the right people. Any other announcements that you would like to share?
Hi, it's Sam, if it's okay. It's
Yeah.
Alan Lee from the, like Sam said, the Academy of Leadership and Innovation. We're really excited to host several informatic presentations at ALI CSM 23. Looks like there are several there that Sam could probably and others are participating in this group. So thank you so much. I do see that there's initially on Saturday at 8 a.m. Beyond Clinical Practice Careers That Matter, Health Informatics and Rehab. And Sam, maybe there's the other one that you could talk about. But again, I'm the current ALI Technology SIG Director, following footsteps of Steve Wilkinson and Bob Latz and others who've been our Technology SIG Directors. So please join us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alan. It's great to see you again. Yeah, there's another session that few of us are going to. Dawn Magnuson, she's leading this this topic of incorporating health informatics in our profession. We talked, so Steve, Julia, and Eric Toole, we presented last month about, and we presented this, what health informatics, put it into our curriculum. What does that look like using concept analysis and concept mapping? We're happy to share that work. It's but we primarily focus on education, but I think the CSM topic will be more of education, but also what would it look like a little bit in the context of post-professional setting. Well, with that in mind, I'd like to introduce our next guest speaker. It's my honor to introduce Dr. Stephen Hunter. Yeah. And Dr. Hunter, he has a decorated career in physical therapy, and I've met him it's been maybe a couple years ago or so. Yeah, and he spent a lot of his when you look at his work, value-based care, using outcomes and data, and establishing that culture of excellence in his team and his health system. And he's currently the director of internal process control for Intermountain Rehabilitation Services. He's been a past president of NORA. For those of you who are not familiar with NORA, NORA is a national association with rehabilitation providers and agencies, and served many committees in APTA, and it is really my honor, and I'm really grateful that you're here, Stephen, and we want to welcome you, and we are just anxious to hear what you have for us today. So welcome, and I'm going to share.
Hey, thanks.
Here. Yeah.
All right, I'll share, and I appreciate the opportunity to share. I know several of you on the call, and so I hope I don't bore you with some things that you may have already seen, and also. I'll talk a lot about what we've done here at Intermountain Healthcare, and I have to say that Intermountain is committed to resourcing rehab services quite well, and so I don't want to, brag as I go through this, because we have a lot of things we're trying to do better and a lot of challenges, and we certainly have not gotten where we want to get, but I do recognize that Intermountain's resourced quite well with the support. So I want to share some of that and hopefully allow you to, learn from this. And I certainly can learn from you. So I'm going to share here. Let's see. All right, give this a try. Okay. And I'm going to ask the same thing that Sam did. I guess you can see this slide I've got. Okay, so I'm on a different screen, so I'll apologize for kind of keeping my head turned a little bit so I can see what we're doing. But so I kind of titled this "Real-Time Outcomes to Improve Care and Influence," and I was asked to share a little bit about Intermountain, and then also a little bit about some of the dashboards we use, and if we have time, I'd like to go into a live demonstration. I've got that teed up if we do. And I don't know, Sam, how long do you want me to take with this? I'll start a stopwatch and make sure I don't go over.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, we would love to have you long as you want. I'm sure there's going to be some discussion. So if you can leave us like maybe 10-15 minutes of Q&A, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Okay, great. So the first thing Rob just asked, I do some volunteer work in Africa, helping people get wheelchairs. I work with an NGO that donates these wheelchairs for free. And so he asked me just to share a couple of pictures real quick. So this is something my wife and I do. These are some pictures of when we were there 2 weeks ago, helping some people. It was interesting. This gentleman on the right is a guy that 6'3" and 92 years old and severe spinal stenosis, and he had never seen a walker. And when he leaned on this walker and got relief leaning forward, he looked at me and he said, "This is the best invention anyone has ever made," And I was like, oh my gosh, 92-year-old guy, he's never seen a walker before. This was in Rwanda. So we spend time in Rwanda, Uganda, which is in East Africa, and go over there. We haven't been for a few years because of COVID, but we usually go over there a couple of times a year to help people and see some really interesting stuff, some really severe birth defects. This little lady on the right in her 30s and probably weighs 40 pounds and was born without legs and really deformed arms. The guy on the left was a child gunshot wound when he was 3 years old, and his lower limbs didn't develop, even though his upper body did. And so, these are two examples of folks that we've been able to get in wheelchairs that, the mobility obviously changes their life. So, all right, enough about that. So Intermountain Healthcare, again, recently merged this past year with the SCL health system. And so it's now in 7 or 8 states, 33 hospitals, and has about 60,000 employees. I think with this merger, it's now the 8th largest health system in the country. So I was asked to talk a little about how you can use outcome data in terms of working with payers, and I'll do that toward the end. But this is a slide I use quite a bit that just talks about how we're still not giving up the fee-based stability. We've got the boat leaving with value-based care. We've got the payer in the boat. We got the patient in the boat. They've embraced this. And some providers are still straddling the security of fee-based to some of the risk of value-based. But for Intermountain, fortunately, we're all in with value-based care. And because 50% of our income at Intermountain is at risk, meaning it's either prepaid or bundled or at some risk. So half of it is there. So we're pretty into that. So Sam mentioned the Learn organization, which Intermountain is part of that. And I do want to just take a few slides to talk about, tee up why, we've felt that this data collection is so important. So, what is a learning health system? Well, it's a system that applies evidence and is in the process of continual discovery through the outgrowth of patient care. And I really like that definition. There's characteristics, and of course the top characteristic is science and informatics, right? It's this real-time access to data, digital capture, it's working with the patient-clinician relationships, it's making sure that incentives are aligned, either pay or reimbursement to promote learning in a health system. And it's the key to this is culture, and we'll talk a bit about that. And a culture where data is accepted by providers and that they can, and the transparent data doesn't threaten them, that they're not going to get beat up if their outcomes aren't good, that this is all about learning and everybody doing better. And then quality improvement research is a really important part to a learning health system. So I debated whether I should take the time to show these slides on this quality improvement methodology, but I thought, what? this is so core. And in fact, if you only walked away from this presentation with these 6 things and thought, hey, maybe there's some of these things that I can integrate in my teaching or my facility, it would be worth it without me showing you anything else from Intermountain Healthcare. So I want to just quickly go through these. And this is really the methodology for using data in a quality improvement process. And this is one of our dashboards that I can show later on, but essentially it shows us what's the high priority things that you should focus on. Because, you know, people are like, well, where should I start? You know, and this shows that low back pain is 20% of what we see at Intermountain, followed by knee surgical, another 13%. So a third of the patients we see at Intermountain are either either non-operative low back pain or ACL or TKA surgery. So it's like, okay, obvious we should focus on that. If we don't get good at those things, then it's tough to get good at other things. And really 80% of what we see, as you can see on this Pareto chart, is what probably most of you see in orthopedics, right? It's conservative, an operative knee, back, shoulder. I mean, that's the majority. So we got to start there, right? And so then the next step is, okay, take one of those things and build a best evidence protocol, right? And this is, we've used different things and it's evolving, but we're still focusing on the treatment-based classification for good or bad. And this is, a one-page graphic of that. And then you've got to build that into what you do. And it's got to become part of your daily workflow. So this is how we've done it. We have a Cerner-based EMR. So this is a part of our documentation. At the end of the eval, the therapist goes through and they got to click, well, what's the classification? So what's going to drive my treatment on the very first visit? And so this is built into the EMR, and it's a discrete field, so we can track it and we can look at outcomes and utilization. And then there's this blue text, which is rudimentary at best, but it helps guide a therapist to know, well, do I really know what classification from? I just did my eval, and this can kind of help guide decision making. We're in the process right now of using AI to do this. It's the project that is high on my priority list, but right now this is what we've got. So then the next step, here's step 4, is you got to embed this system to track data, right? And this is, we use this rehabilitation outcomes management system, the homegrown system at Intermountain, and we collect patient-reported outcomes on orthopedic patients every single visit, and I'll go through that. And with our neuro patients, we're getting it, I think, around 70%, because we don't do it every visit. But in lymphedema, pelvic health, we're collecting outcomes in those areas too, as well as the AMPAC now in our acute setting. So that's key, is that we have that, because what we want to do is we want to feed this back into a loop where we can monitor if our therapists are adherent with this evidence. And this is small. I'm not expecting you to see this spreadsheet, but this is the hardest thing we do right now. Again, we're trying to automate this, but we do chart reviews using spreadsheets where we identify the green on the left is what are the minimum things that you should do in a patellofemoral eval. And we identify those things, and then we identify on the blue side, what is best evidence in the first visit, the first therapy visit. And we go through our chart reviews and we check those, and then we can look to see, how compliant our therapists are at meeting those. And what we found is a direct statistical correlation with therapists that complete the eval and use evidence and the outcome. And it seems like a no-brainer, but there's a direct link there. Okay, so then does it make a difference? Okay, that's the big thing. And I'm going to show some screenshots, but then we can get into some live data if we've got time here. So this is patellofemoral pain as of last night. So I pulled this data from last night, and you can see that when we implemented this standardized process, the rate of failure rate. So this is the percent. The blue line is the percent of patients who failed to meet an MCI difference. And again, this is not our goal. MCID is not a goal, and we're actually moving away from MCID to percent change anyway. But it's a minimum, right? It's a minimum that we expect our therapists. And so this shows that with patellofemoral pain, it was around 25%. We implement this standard practice, we do some auditing, and it's coming down to around say 18, 19%. Failure rate, and we've got 400 or 500 patients in this database. So the question is, okay, well, how? I mean, if you use this process I just went through, does it only work with knees or backs or well, what we found is it works with everything, right? If you follow that process, identify the evidence, measure it, support your therapist with data, that whenever you implement this process, we have seen statistically significant improvements or reductions of failure rates. And again, we measure failure rates because we're in a QI setting, but so we see this reduction. So this is low back pain. This is neck pain. Again, this is data through midnight last night, so it's fairly accurate, and we've got 1,200 to 1,700 patients a year, and so it just seems to work, right? And we have hopefully we have a couple of studies that are in final review right now that we can actually share some of this in the literature with our TK. So again, quality improvement, measuring, and continuing to improve. These are the keys that then create value, which is reduction in cost. And this is what we are publishing, which is with our total knee. And the nice thing about looking at run charts that are up to date is you can see where you start to mess up, right? So we did that in 2017. We saw an uptick of this failure rate, and then we tried to improve. And then this is the last few years. And this is interesting because I just looked at this data last night, and it's obvious in 2022, we need to relook at that because we've seen these nice trends. And now we've seen an uptick from 3.1 to 3.5% of a failure rate with like TKA, and we need to realize, maybe we need to do something. This is with 8 visits. Okay, so let's just shift a little bit here. Looking at my timer here to make sure that I'm staying on time. But so how does this relate to payers, right? So Intermountain is set up where we have somebody was smart back in the 80s at Intermountain, even though it's a nonprofit, and they said, we should get our own health insurance plan. And they did. And this is called Select Health, and now it's the largest commercial payer in Utah. And so it captures about 45% of Utah population. So Intermountain now has this payer, and that's influenced a lot of value because we've got a payer saying, you save us money if you do good care and don't overutilize. And then the operations side that says, yeah, we still got to make money. And we try to have that balance. So we thought, well, our own payer should be the most receptive payer of anyone to partnering with therapy, right? I mean, if anyone's going to do it, it would be somebody within Intermountain. Well, we worked for 10 years to try and do a lot of things with this payer, and they were just not receptive. And what happened is we published this study. Julie Fritz was the lead author in 2008. And I've highlighted this guy, Matt Speckman. He's the third author. Matt Speckman was an actuary for Select Health. And finally, Select Health says, oh, you guys actually do save a lot of money when you do best care and you do it early with therapy, because our own actuary is a co-author and you got all the data from us. And so finally, after 10 years of Gerard, Brent, and I beating our heads against the wall, Select Health said, oh, we can work with you, because this showed that when therapists are simply adherent to active care, it's not even a care process guideline. It's just doing exercise and education and minimizing modalities. That when they do that, we save $1,400 per episode downstream with back pain. And we also see all these other reductions in things that are harmful to patients, okay, like injections and surgery and opioids and all these medications. So when therapists get it right, we save this money. when therapists don't get it right, then we don't help any of those things. So when therapists were doing modalities or non-evidence-based care, then, so Select Health wakes up and we start to work with them on some things, and there was some that went good and bad. And so this is a slide of just lessons learned in working with payers with data. And number one is, obviously you got to know your data. So because they have data, but guess what? They only have utilization data. They don't have outcome data generally. So they're going to tell you how expensive it is, and they're not going to know if what they're paying improves the patient unless you come to them with that data. You've got to be able to severity adjust, because, and these are the factors that we have found are the highest. The intake scores, whether you're measuring photo, promise, or the legacy measures that we use, that intake score by far with regression analysis is the most predictive thing of the outcome. So you've got to get that intake score on just about everybody. And then, the surgical mix, surgery, non-surgery, age, gender, payer, chronicity, and BMI, if available, are the other things that we found to really be predictive. And again, this study that Gerard published this past year on predicting outcomes uses that data. The other thing is, if you want to work with payers, I suggest you just start small and ask the payer, what are you having problems with? Is it low back pain? Is it surgical knee? And then kind of work with them on that to do it and start in an area. Now, the most important thing, in my opinion, on this list is negotiate the shared savings up front, because not to really be a downer with payers, but they are out to make a business. And what we did, which was a big mistake, is we went in and did all this nice work and then showed them how much money we saved them and said, I'm sure you want to share in those savings with us. And their first response was, no, we're not going to share. Thanks for saving us money. Thanks for making us much more profitable. But you know what? That should be your job anyway. You should be doing the best care at the lowest cost. And so thanks, and I've learned this from other payers. And so if I was doing this over, I would go in and I would say, look, here's what your current costs are. What if we did something that reduced that cost, by $1,400 per low back pain episode? Would that be helpful to you? Well, yeah, sure. Well, so this is going to be a lot of work. So how about if we share that savings, and before we start? That's when you want to do it, not after the fact, because you've already saved them the money. A lot of payers are just going to say thank you and take the money to the bank. So, and you need to establish this in a contract. And I'm going to show you some things that we did in a contract that we did, and then look at long-term savings. Okay. So I'm going to give you an example of how we worked with our own payer for 5 years, saved a ton of money, and then they ended the incentive program because they were like, hey, this is great. You don't need to share anymore because you just did it, and I'm sure you're going to keep doing it. So I would make sure that you're looking at long-term savings. So let me give you an example of what we did. And this again was with Select Health, commercial payer. So we set up in 2012 some goals with them. And this was a very interesting thing, because what we did actually is we didn't get better reimbursement. This payer actually cut a check to our individual therapists. They could earn up to $2,500 a year with a check from Select Health if they met specific goals. And it was a range, but so this was like, I was like, this is the best ever, right? You got a payer that's actually giving you money in your own pocket, not just to your system. So the first year, we just set up some really basic goals, which were to try and decrease the patients who had, or decrease the number of therapists who had a ratio of active to passive care. In other words, evidence-based to non-evidence-based. And we wanted to also just collect data. We wanted to make sure our therapists were collecting the data. And the payer bought into this. I mean, they were like, yeah, we get the data, we get you doing less, non-evidence-based care. We know that you're going to save us money. So that's kind of what we did. And we did this with low back and TKA because, you know, that's the biggest thing that we see as therapists on the non-surgical. Now that evolved. And now I've just shown you on the right in 2017, how those goals changed from process and goals into outcome goals, where we were very specific and we had different regions at Intermountain that were at different levels. And so we had these failure to progress goals, which again, the percent of people who failed to meet an MCID, and we set it up by our different regions. And if the therapist within that region met the goal, then those therapists would get that check in the mail. And then in 2018, we went to individual therapist goals, and it just got really more and more focused on patient outcomes than processes. And then in 2019, the payers like, okay, thanks for doing this. We're just going to put this on pause. And when they say pause, that means, you know, they never brought it up again. So they are continuing to get the benefit and they're not sharing anymore. So that was what we call the pay for performance thing that we did with payers. We also proposed bundle payments, and that's still under consideration. We've really been trying to focus on a no copay visit for the first 4 visits with low back pain, and that's ongoing. I think the thing that's getting the most traction right now, because it's physician-led, is what we call a PT first savings, which is a process that we're working on where therapists will see low back pain patients first before any physician or right after an ED visit. And that's really close. That's going to roll out here in December of this year. Okay, so Sam, I'm checking on how I'm doing here. I'm looking at my time. I've gone 20 minutes. Am I okay to go a little further?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just share some dashboards. Well, yeah, let me share the dashboards, and then I can open it up for some questions, and you can ask questions about some of these payer things. So I'm going to show you. Let's do this live. Okay, so this is live data. So I'm in our dashboard. Whoops. Let's see if it's going to reset for me. Okay, can you see that, Sam? This kind of
Yes, we can
graphy
see
thing. Okay, so we use Tableau, was mentioned earlier, and we have a data analyst that's, fortunately, this is one of the resources we have that's full-time for rehab services that pulls this data from our Cerner-based product and multiple other parts of our EDW to bring it in. So this is the most important thing that we focused on, getting the data in. So what you're looking at here is, just move this out of the way. I just looked at this for the last year. Okay, so we've got about 60,000 patients that we've seen and entered into this dashboard. And if you look down here, we've got some metrics that we've realized are really important. You know, are we getting these outcomes on, you know, multiple visits? And especially, are we getting it on the last visit? Because if you don't get it on the last visit, then you underestimate the benefit of therapy, right? I mean, if you're collecting it every 2 weeks and you get it, and then the patient goes 2 more weeks and self-discharges, your last data point is 2 weeks before they finished, and they would have made much more improvement. All right, so that is a critical metric for us. And you can see as of today, we're getting that at 93% of our patients, and 98% of our patients were getting this classification where we group them in homogeneous groups. We don't use ICD-10s. We've developed a little more simple classification. So that dashboard is really, really critical. Okay, I'm gonna now show you one other thing. Okay, so I'm gonna show you another part of our dashboard, which is called our classification. This is where you saw this Pareto chart, which is, even though it's a very simple dashboard and just gives us followings, it's really, really helpful. And what we can do is, like, here's lumbar conservative or shoulder, knee surgical. If I click on that bar, then Tableau takes me and shows me all of the subclassifications. So with knee surgical, 2,400 of these 4,100 patients are TKA patients, right? That have had total knee arthroplasty surgery, and 727 are ACL. And then I can go in and I can even click on those and it'll drill down and give me the outcomes here. I can filter on which surveys. So if this is TKA, I'm going to just look at the KOS survey, apply that, and it'll just kind of clean this up a little bit. So now I can look at what was the average admit score, you know, for TKA on the KOS of 41, the discharge had improved about 30 points, 17% failure rate with one visit. Again, I can go in and change the visits because we collect this every visit, and it'll update the dashboard. So when they come in for 6 visits, only 4% of those patients failed to meet an MCID. So this is the advantage of collecting the outcomes every visit, right? Is I can look at the sweet spot, right? I can see, you know, if 6 visits is good, is 8 visits better, you know, and there's going to reach this point of no return. It is a little better. I now go down to 3% failure rate. So, you know, that's that dashboard. I'm going to show you one more, my favorite actually, that I showed you with several examples. So we can go in and look at any large group. So let's look at, let's look at back pain, because I want to air some dirty laundry here and tell you that we're not as good as we think we are. So this is our low back pain. Let me, whoops, no, this is not, no, sorry. This is low back pain people who've had a knee survey. That's not going to work. Let's change that. Okay, so you can see we really tried to focus in 2019 on doing chart audits, okay, and that seemed to help. So this is with 8 visits. Let me show you that 5 visits is not really much better, 27% failure rate. So fortunately, we only average about 5 visits, and most of our therapists don't treat people beyond that. But let me just show you something that's going to show you how bad things can get. So this is our acute and chronic, right? And I can go in here and filter. On the first visit, we gather information on the patient's chronicity, okay? So I can go in and say, hey, let's just look at our chronic patients, okay? So I'm going to go in and say chronic, yes. So it's going to apply that filter, and now it's going to show that. So I can get that out of the way. Okay, not as good, right? And it's kind of plateaued out. All right, that's with 5 visits. So there's a 33% failure rate when our patients are chronic, as opposed to 26 when they're acute and chronic. And again, if I wanted to go back in and look at just the acute patients, you know, that's going to look better. Now, let me switch from MCID to percent improvement. Okay, so in MCID, we use the oswestry, and the MCID is 6 points that we've adopted. So I'm going to switch over now, and let's look at a percent change as opposed. And let's just look at a 30% change, which Julie Fritz says is the minimum of a good outcome. Okay, 50% of our patients that are chronic, okay, I'm giving you the worst case scenario. The 50% of that patients are making a 30% improvement, all right? It doesn't seem that good to me, right? And what Julie says is you should really get a 50% improvement. That's ideal, okay? So let me go in and just change this to a 50% improvement with chronic patients, and you can see that only 70%, only 30% of our patients that have chronic low back pain are getting a 50% improvement, you know, with an average of 5 visits. All right. Not that good, really. Think about it. I didn't think it was that good, but I've seen some other published literature that's like, everybody's struggling with chronic back pain. So this is just to show you an example of the ability we have once we get the data in, okay, to create these dashboards and then look at this data in real time. This data updates every night at midnight. So patients that were seen yesterday are included in this data set. So that's kind of a, you know, kind of a nice thing. Okay, I'm going to close out with a couple of slides, and then if we have time for questions, great. If not, So this is an abstract I submitted to CSM for February, and it got accepted as a poster, which looks at, because we collect the visits every visit, it's kind of looking at this rate of improvement over visits to see if is there a sweet spot here? I mean, you know, where we start to not see any more improvement. And this is with TKA, and this is with, I think, 30% improvement. So you can see that really, I mean, even though we only average in Intermountain 9 to 10 visits with TKA, we're still seeing patients that are getting some pretty good improvement, even up to 14, 15 visits. And when we go to payers, that's the information we should give them. Don't give them your average visits, because you're missing out on maybe 30, 40% of people that would still get quite a bit better above that average visit, right? What you should do is give payers this range in which most people get better, right, on visits. And that's what, you know, that's what this slide shows. And then this shows the percent of patients that reach that. Okay, so you can see this is a 30% improvement. I should have done 50, but you know, even up around this 12, 13 visit, you know, that's when about 70, 80% of the people are really still seeing some improvement. Okay. Lastly, this is really complicated, but this is an individual therapist dashboard. I've taken the name off it, but so they can go in and they can look at all of their different areas, shoulder, hip, knee, or whatever. They can look at their top box score on Press Ganey. They can look at their percentile ranking in terms of efficiency. They can look at the median number of days it takes a patient to get in to see them. This therapist is pretty good, but it's below what we want. And they can look at their efficiency. What percent of their time is billed time? You know, and our standard is to try and get it at 65, and this therapist is, you know, lower than that. And then what are their average procedures per episode? So we're looking at, you know, how many procedures do we do per episode? So this is all on a dashboard that is pulls data from these different sources and is updated every night. Okay, I'm going to stop. I've got some other things I could show you on our acute and inpatient AMPAC scores, but I'm going to wait because I don't want to take all your meeting. Any questions on some of this?
This is fantastic. Yeah, any questions? I have several questions, but I'm wondering if I should. So I'll start with this. I think first of all, thank you so much being real with your data, being transparent. It's illuminating to know that that we can learn and being informed with our own health system. Just collect and see it. I think this is what the message is. I'm wondering, I've always wanted to find out from different, you know, how do we bring others up together? And you have resources. And I've always struggled with what are the absolutely required resources and it's staff level versus it's nice to have. I know that you have an analyst, you have essentially a QI team, and sometimes it's essentially some clinics maybe a QI team of one and a spreadsheet to start out with. So we'd love to get your take.
Yeah.
What would that look like?
Yeah, this is a good point, Sam. So we started doing this in 1999. You know, we hired Gerard. He was in private practice and he came over to Intermountain, and I was able to negotiate Gerard 2 days a week. So he had to be in the clinic 3 days a week, you know, and we were in the same 900 square foot clinic, which was just, you know, that was a story in and of itself. But so 2 days a week, that's where we started. No analyst, no research person, Gerard 2 days a week. And then it just evolved from there. And how we got our analyst, Devin Woodfield, is Gerard started to get some grants and include in the grant analyst time. And he would get, 20% of Devin's time. And then after a while, it was 100% after we got several grants. And so then rehab services just saw the value and hired him. So this has really been an evolution over 2 decades. So, I wish, can say that Intermountain supported this from the start. We kind of had to prove to them, that we needed these people. So for me, in answer to your question, just getting somebody, a researcher in there, and I'm preaching to the choir here because you're all health services researchers, and we contracted with Julie Fritz's time for a couple of days a week, and then it evolved to where Gerard was full time, and then in the research, and then we were able to get other team members. But I would say a researcher a couple of days a week would be the bare minimum. And maybe you need to contract with a school, or the school needs to contract with a health system if they don't have their own internal health system. And then I would say just try to get, maybe 10 hours a week of a data analyst and start there. And doesn't take long to prove the value of those people.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, it seems like the right mindset. It almost sounds like a grassroots level many years ago, and then it expanded. And thank you so much for sharing the avenues of even just starting with grants. I think that's a feasibility there. Any other questions? Yes. Hi, Matt. Welcome.
Hello, thanks, Stephen. Excellent presentation. Just a quick question. I'm developing a program at Augustana University. What type of skill sets do you think that the PTs of the future are going to need in order to be able to help you maximize this level of analysis on the back end? Are there things that we could be teaching or training our students to make that data collection documentation more robust, to be better for you?
Yeah, but that's such a good question. I just spoke at Regis University this past year on that exact topic. And you know what I think? This is my personal opinion. Curiosity. I think if you can train therapists in school to be curious, to want to investigate things, to want to find out things, when I interview a therapist, I'm asking them, what are your interests? What are you curious about? And what do you do about that? What do you read? That doesn't have to be related to therapy, because you can always teach them to be curious about therapy, but just the curiosity of someone is pretty critical. And then the other thing is that they're really willing to change based on the evidence, right? That they're kind of evidence-based and willing to change their practice based on that, even if they're an old guy like me, that's been in this for 38 years, that I'm willing to look at my own outcomes and say, I'm not that good with chronic neck pain. I need to really improve my skills. I think those are two attributes that are helpful. You can teach therapists how to be good manual therapists and how to dose exercise, but the curiosity, and their humility, the ability to change when they get more evidence, I think that's harder to teach.
Thanks, Stephen.
Great question. To add that comment, excellent question, Matt. I'm going to post this article because Stephen, you mentioned about QI, kind of really the centerpiece of a lot of this work, just QI mindset. And I think there's an article here that for any of us to look at, it's where we are in current DPT programs in our QI methodology. So I won't go into detail, but just FYI. Yeah. And you had your hand up. Oh, I think you're muted.
Now?
Oh, there you go.
A minute. Okay. I'm a little reluctant to ask a question as a newbie, but that was a great presentation. And I'm just wondering, in terms of the direction we're going by way of clinical decision support systems in physical therapy, I mean, it feels like arguably you're tracking for that, Stephen, for diagnostics and for intervention. I'd be curious if you're aware of other health systems doing work at this level, and or if there's a push to create some kind of product to benefit other practices?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, and a lot of these are some of these learn organization health systems. The University of Pittsburgh is doing good stuff. Josh Johnson, I think Josh, he's at Cleveland Clinic, a health services researcher. We worked on this study with a postdoc of Jennifer Stevens-Lapsley at Colorado, who's now at Marquette. Dr. Kaplan, I think there are people doing this. I think, this is a great question because this came up, Sam, right, last year, right? Can we get some standardization of what we measure so that we can share this across? And Chris is on the call, and that's a lot of his expertise. And, do we use promise? Do we use legacy? Do we use both? And how do we do that? And can we get people measuring some of the same things? I think that's really important. And when you do that, then you can kind of all grow together. But that's still a bit of a challenge. Well, just getting measurement is still a bit of a challenge. And then deciding what they measure is the next step up from that.
Yeah.
I don't know, Chris, you got your hand up. You probably have a comment on this anyway.
No, not a comment. I actually have a question. So I'll let us finish this one out. And then I have a very related question.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess my question, as you know, my real passion and interest is in end user adoption of the technology to manage quality. And so you and I had this conversation probably 15 years ago, is how do you get your providers to adopt every visit use of the PROs? How do you get them to adopt the care pathways? How do you get them, to Ann's question, adopt the technology? If you had to pull one or two levers, is it template build in your EHR? Is it culture and the way that you promote? Because right now we have so many competing priorities. How do we get people to actually care about the processes so that the process can be carried out and have its effect?
Yeah. I'll comment, and I'm sure that people have comments here too. So this is, Chris, since we've talked, this has changed as I've looked at that. You don't get a lot of adoption early on. Okay, at least I haven't had that at Intermountain. But if you can get some champions that start with this, what peers tend to do is look at other peers that are in their situation, and when they start to adopt and use it and say, wow, this is pretty valuable, then that's really how I think the adoption spreads. It's tough to get top-down adoption of this, in my opinion. I think you just get people that are excited, maybe a pilot group, but you select people that are enthusiastic and they're really wanting to use evidence and measure, and they're willing to realize that their outcomes aren't as good as they thought they were, and they're willing to make changes. And then you start with that group and just kind of let it grow. And what happens is it starts to turn heads, and people start to go, well, gee, this clinic's doing it, and their outcomes are really pretty good, and doctors like to refer to them. And so maybe I should see what they're doing. And then it kind of grows from there. And that's what's happened here at Intermountain. We've just expanded into our neuro groups about 4 or 5 years ago. And we had some techniques that our neurotherapists were using that were non-evidence-based. And we've really focused now on evidence with some of our neuro patients and using some of these high-intensity training things. And we've seen this expansion of adoption with therapists in that neuro area that were so entrenched in some of these techniques that have no evidence and come over. And it's all because of the culture and because they were like seeing, a few champions that were questioning what they were doing. I don't know if that answers your question, Chris. I still struggle with this, how we get more people to adopt this and realize that you're always going to have people that don't do it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And quick follow-up, because I know we're wrapping up. Do you feel integration into your EHR templates was kind of pivotal, that really helped? It seems that you guys made a big shift. It could have just been you became mature at that, but in the literature, it seems like that's effective. Even if not doing clinical decision support, you just integrated some of the stuff into the workflows of the EHR.
Yeah, no, you're right on. You got to make it easy. You got to make the outcome collection easy. You got to make the ability to look at this data easy with these dashboards, and you got to make it easy. It's got to save them time in the EMR. It can't create more time. You know, the collection of data and the use of data has to save people time so that they'll go, there's a lot of reasons I want to do this, not just to look at my own care, but the way they've set it up, it saves me time. And that's, you know, this project I'm working on, that's probably going to be, you know, another 2 years, is, you know, using artificial intelligence to just gather this information and provide the feedback in real time to the therapist. A lot of my stuff is retrospective, right? It's after the care is done, then we look at it. I got to know on the second visit if my care is good or not, so that I can make changes in the treatment session. And that's kind of what we're hoping, you know, we can do.
Yeah.
Great, thanks for that.
Change is hard. Change takes time. You know,
Wow.
I just want to say, yeah, behavior change. That's a great question or comment, Alan. Pandemic change any behaviors, AI, machine learning. I mean, even telehealth, right? Pandemic really, either you do it or you do it. And a lot of times when we talk about outcomes, it's like, it's so much driven by pairs and policies within the clinic. And it's like, you got to do it, just document it. But it doesn't quite change the behavior that you really want. But yeah.
Hey, Dr. Henner, I was on that. I was just curious, has truly, with the pandemic, and you mentioned AI, do you see the future direction, not just in therapy, but in your, you know, new system, like other avenues for cost saving? Because I think there are areas that, as you said, behavior is hard to change.
Yeah.
However, there's some, you know, it's going to be pretty much mandates for other things that you're looking at.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why you're seeing all these disruptors, you know, of, Vori Health and Sword and you know, MedBridge is branching out and doing things, and Limber Health. I mean, these are all companies that are saying, you know, they're not just looking at a virtual way of delivering care. They're looking at a way to say, we need to treat, you know, less serious patients differently, less expensively, you know, and you know, then the tougher patients, the chronic ones, that we need to use these psychologically informed, you know, approaches. We need to be more intense. We've got to really prioritize our time. And I think these disruptors are wonderful. You know, I mean, they're threatening to people, but you know what? I think that they're the way of the future. So, Alan, I think you're spot on. We've got to change what we're doing. The pandemic helped it, but the cost is also, you know, forcing us to change.
Yeah. You know, I with respect to time, we had about a minute left, and I told Ken Miller, he posted this question. You look at other population like CVA, Parkinson's, and neuro patients. I believe that is the case, Stephen. Like, you do look at the inpatient population as well with this work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, was that a question to me or just a comment?
I think it was a
people-
question and a comment. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was the last question that I can see on the chat.
Did you
Yes.
have a question, Brian? I know Brian had a question.
I didn't want to take us over time, but I was just curious, any work on the correlation between functional outcomes and the patient-reported outcomes? Our current bundle that we're trying to negotiate right now has, and Hallie's not on this, so she won't yell at me, they want to use the timed up and go and the COOS score for discharge. Any correlations between those?
We haven't done it. I mean, I think that we are now collecting some of those. That would be a fun project for someone to do, because we have, especially the timed up and go, we have that on our total knee patients now, but we have not correlated that with the patient report. It'd be very interesting to do. Somebody probably has, though. I don't know. There's probably people on this call that have more information on that than I do.
Maybe that's one of the topics that we should do. Just start sharing our time up and go data, see what kind of patients you have there. start sharing. And I love the fact that you came and you were transparent, and we need more of that. We don't have a clear benchmark or the national benchmark that we should have. And I think with
Mhm.
your sharing of your work, it really fuels the fire that we need to push everyone to head like this. So thank you so much for joining us, and for all
Yeah,
the participants. Really great conversation. I'll hang out here for next 5 minutes or so, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And we are still, I think December meeting might not be the case because of the holidays and travels, but we'll start reset in January. But we'll let you everyone know. Okay. Have a wonderful rest of
Hey,
the
thanks,
Thursday.
Sam.
Thank you, Stephen. Really appreciate
Mhm.
it.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Stephen. That was great.